All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your busy days to join us to talk about the new state of the enrollment management landscape. This session is going to be recorded and we will be sending it out. You'll also, after the call, receive in the email a copy of the full report. So if you have any questions on that, please reach out and we would be happy to talk through anything there or ask us any questions today. So at the bottom of the screen, there is a Q&A box. So please submit any questions that you have through there, and we will have plenty of time at the end to walk through this. So COVID changed a lot of things for us, and we've got some updated information with impact on the labor market and on the marketing and enrollment landscape. And then you'll also see later on this year that we will be releasing a refreshed and updated version of our benchmarks report as well to give you some additional color on what some of the different key performance metrics across the entire student marketing funnel, marketing and enrollment funnel are. So with that, I'd like to introduce our two presenters today. I am Tracy Krackemeyer, our Chief Relationship Officer, and I'm going to be handing it over to these two brilliant folks. Katie Tomlinson is our Senior Director of Analytics and BI here at Education Dynamics. She has been with the company and working in education marketing and enrollment for 18 years. Stephen Fisher's been with the organization for 10 years. He's our Senior Manager of Market Research and has been a big part of a lot of the information that you have seen us and been accustomed to us putting out into the marketplace. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie to get started.
Sure. So just to cover a little bit regarding our methodology, our presentation really is going to contain a select few bits of secondary and primary research and analysis that pertains to the higher education marketing industry, labor market statistics, and key benchmarks as prepared by us. Neither we nor our respective partners make any representation that any of the secondary data is accurate, and we have just tried to capture as much as possible, but understand that some of the information is related to self-reported data from third parties. To kick off, we're going to take a look at how COVID has impacted the labor market and what the occupational projections look like for the future. The first slide, we're just going to talk about the overall labor market because it's extremely important to understand how economic recessions can impact overall enrollments. Over the period of the Great Recession, we saw an increase of college enrollments of around 3 million. Once the economy started to recover, more jobs were added to the market, unemployment decreased, and the demand for education wasn't as high. And starting sometime around 2015, we started to see those enrollments level out to the numbers we had seen in 2006. As the market continued to improve, we just saw historically low unemployment rates. So the story at the beginning of the year would have been those unemployment rates were historically low, and then COVID hit. And unemployment rose higher in the 3 months than it did in 2 whole years of the Great Recession. And while the story seemed to be that the under or uneducated individuals had been most impacted, those holding some sort of degree or certificate were also impacted, and some quite significantly. The current unemployment rates across all areas of educational attainment are relatively close right now to the peaks of what we saw in the Great Recession, indicating we're in pretty uncharted territory. Just taking a look at the June year-over-year unemployment numbers, those holding less than a high school degree saw an increase of year-over-year unemployment of 234%. Some college or associates saw 260% year-over-year, associates at 243%, bachelors 252%, and then higher than a bachelor's ranged from 133% to 195%, really illustrating the fact that no educational attainment category was left untouched. So in the next slide, in June, the Dallas Fed put together some unemployment rate recovery scenarios, none of which looked particularly favorable for us. What we know right now is that our current unemployment rate in August is sitting at 8.4%, which is reflective of somewhere between a fast and a medium recovery rate based on their projections, but it really doesn't tell the whole story. In August, the number of permanent jobs lost increased by 534,000, which brought the total to 3.1 million, which is a 145% increase over last year. So really, in reality, things are a lot worse than they seem. Even though the unemployment rates appear to be improving, we're really still far from being recovered. We are also seeing an impact, and it's varied across different regions. So on the left-hand side, you can see the net change in unemployment rates by state as of May 2020. And on the right, you can see the differences that we experienced by state in terms of total job posting volumes from March of May of 2019 versus March of May of 2020. What we know about the future. The data suggests that metropolitan areas that are dependent on energy, tourism, leisure, hospitality are likely to suffer more and for longer, while those dependent on industry, agriculture, professional services, etc., will likely recover more quickly. And right now, as far as recovery, what it looks like is states that are seeing the quickest rebound are Oregon, Connecticut, New Jersey, Vermont, and Illinois. And the slowest to recover include Georgia, Florida, New Hampshire, and Oklahoma. We really need to keep this in mind as we consider program portfolio performance and how the live labor market can impact the overall needs and demands. Next, we want to take a little look at current job holders, and they're pretty uncertain about their future. At the start of the pandemic, Strata Education Network issued an ongoing study to understand how COVID was impacting the job market. And what they found was that as of August 26th, 65% of workers are still worried about losing their job as a result of COVID. A little more than a third of them report if they lost their job, they would be looking to change their fields into areas like business, IT, or finance, which really this sets the stage for additional educational attainment, certificates, reskilling, or reentry into the market. And also what we know is that some occupations are actively shrinking and projected to almost disappear. Some of this is driven by automation and shifting consumer demands, but we also expect to see that COVID will have an impact in ways we're not even seeing yet. Based on the 2028 BLS projections, we know that secretaries, fabrication, cashiers, retail, and even your tellers and postal carriers will be most impacted by total volume erosion of jobs. And next, let's talk a little bit about what we expect to grow. Based on the 2028 BLS projections, there should be more growth in occupational outcomes commanding a degree or some sort of formal education. And as you can see, occupations requiring an associate's or a bachelor's will add up to almost 3 million jobs and growing by 8% respectively. And those requiring some sort of formal education will make up roughly 45% of all of the jobs in 2028.
All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about the labor market and the current impact that the COVID-19 has had on it, now we're going to move into talking about enrollment trends and what is happening within the market shift, both on student behavior side as well as within current and summer enrollment trends.
Great. So you can see here that over the past few years, the enrollments have sort of been steady. There hasn't been too much decline, too much increase. So things have been steady. And that was through spring 2020. They looked that way and then COVID hit. So we'll get into that in a little bit. But you can see here, to dovetail as to what Katie was saying earlier, the growth is certainly in career-oriented fields of study. So you can see on here that the ones with the growth, architecture, psychology, computer information sciences, transportation, and communication technologies, those are career-oriented. They have a set career outcome. The ones that are losing their market share are liberal arts and sciences, family sciences. Construction trades is the only outlier here. and that is a career-oriented focus of study that has seen a drop. But everything else in this regard, the major areas of growth are in the career-oriented areas of study, which we'll see further on as we move on. Next slide, please.
And as Stephen referenced, spring enrollments looked relatively stable, but summer revealed some of the struggles that we're seeing as a result of COVID. Most impacted sectors appear to be the four-year for-profits and really community colleges. Additionally, there were specific degree levels impacted, which included certificates and associate programs. And last, out of the summer data, we started to see some demographic information emerging. Most notably, Hispanic enrollments were up almost in all categories, and the most impacted out of the overall enrollment pool were Blacks, falling 6.1%, and undergraduate men falling 5.2%. The other thing we want to do is give you a little view on the marketing data we're seeing so far and how COVID has impacted traffic and inquiries. So what we're seeing is that organic traffic is increasing and paid search volume has been decreasing. Both channels have seen strong inquiry volumes since June, but lower conversion rates, which really indicates that there's some hesitancy amongst prospective students, which really makes it important to nurture those throughout any stage of the funnel and to ensure your messaging resonates with the prospective students.
So in this table here, you can see, complementing earlier the data that we presented, that again, the career-oriented focuses of study are the ones that also have the largest market share relative to growth as well. So they were growing, and you can see the market share. At the undergraduate level, business is certainly the market leader. However, when you combine the technology-focused areas of study, computer science and IT, and STEM, while granted they are not the same, they certainly mix well together in terms of their focus. That rivals the at the undergraduate side business and actually surpasses business on the graduate side. But you can see here the top 5 areas of study: business, computer science, IT, health, medicine, education and teaching, and STEM are the career-oriented focuses of study, and those are the market leaders. So clearly the market is driven by people who are looking for programs that they sort of see as a way to advance their career, which we'll see in a moment. Next slide, please. You can see here that the main reasons for enrolling in higher education and graduate education among post-traditional students is career-oriented. In fact, 98% of undergraduate students and 98% of graduate students did so for a career-oriented reason. The leading reason being that they want to increase their salary. It's important to note that 20% of graduates, undergraduates also wanted to transition to a new career, which is why they enrolled in further study. But clearly, again, showing earlier that people want to change careers, people want career-oriented topics of study, that clearly careers are the driving factor here and growth in their careers as well. Next slide, please. These students, they want this done quickly. You know, they see that this is, they want, again, to do this to change their job or career or advance. You can see that graduate students are enrolling to change careers mostly, while 50% of undergraduates are doing it to advance in their current career. So clearly, again, there's a career growth or change factor here. The important data here, the interesting data, is that more than a half of both undergraduates and graduates wanted this change to happen in the next 6 months after their completion of study. So they see this as their way of quickly improving their career aspects as well. So not only do they want to get into these career programs, they want that outcome as soon as they possibly can see it. Next slide, please. You know, as Katie mentioned earlier, that conversions are going down relative to year over year. And this is important to note when you think of the fact that 52% of undergraduate students only considered 3 or less schools, and 88% only applied to 3 or less schools. 59% of graduate students considered 3 or less schools, and 82% considered 3 or less schools. So they are doing their research before they even come to you. They know who you are. They know you could be local in the region, which we'll get to in a minute. They're familiar with you. They know that their employers are familiar with you. Their friends and family are too. So they're doing their research and then they're applying right away. The critical thing here is reaching those students as quickly as humanly possible. And our data that's not presented here today, we know that students will most likely enroll at the institution that reaches them or accepts them first. So in order to increase your conversion rates, speed to lead and speed to accept is critical. You can see on the right that it's a degree-oriented market at both the undergraduate and graduate levels, with bachelor's and master's degrees really taking the lion's share of the market. Next slide, please. Tuitions are rising. That's not a secret. That's not something that anyone isn't aware of. However, undergraduates and graduates both said that, a preponderance said, that cost of tuition and fees was at least one of their top 3 enrollment decision factors that would move them or motivate them to enroll at an institution over another. Now, we're not going to sit here and say lower tuition as much as we would like to, because that would certainly help drive enrollments. But the way to do that essentially is the time is money factors. These students are looking to get back in that investment in themselves to get through it quicker. So things like availability of online programs, length of time to complete studies, and locations are important to both undergraduates and graduate study in that they are, that those are things that will help them complete their degree faster, complete their credential faster, get that job career change in that next 6 months even faster. And again, you can even see here the undergraduate side also important is acceptance of previously earned credits, which also again is another thing that will help speed up their completion of their studies. So again, the factor here is enroll them quickly, accept them as soon as you possibly can, since they are targeting you, they know who you are and they want to get in. Enroll them, get them through their studies as fast as possible, as conveniently as possible, so not only they can continue with their other commitments, but finish their degree faster. And that way they can get to that career-oriented goal even faster. Next slide, please. You can see here, as I mentioned earlier, that they know you because you're local. The vast majority of respondents in our studies across the board always enroll with an institution within 50 miles of themselves. So they know you. Again, you have that reputation in the area. They are familiar. You have a long-standing history in the area, or at least a history that is knowledgeable among students. And so they know you and they want to get in there, which is why they enroll locally. It is a local market. So that is what you're seeing the data here saying that. Next slide, please.
Lastly, there's a lot of opportunities to retain your existing students or to retarget stop-outs. And as you can see on the left-hand side, almost 37% of the student population 23 and younger has not finished their degree, which really illustrates a large opportunity to bring them back to education and increase enrollments. Second to that, don't forget your existing student base right now, and retention is really more important than ever. Employ your strategies to monitor those that are at risk, make sure you understand their challenges, and have the right support services in place to make it through the pandemic.
All right, now transitioning into takeaways. And again, please go ahead and use the Q&A box at the bottom to ask any questions, but just want to go over 4 key takeaways from today, and we'll move on to Q&A. But on the focus side of things, students are always the center of what we're doing and continue to adapt around the changes in their needs and preferences. If we're seeing longer app to enrollment time, or does the cadence of how we are reaching out to them need to look different? Does our messaging strategy need to change? As the labor market and some of those things that are going on are giving people the idea that they need to go back to school, are we in areas where they know that we offer the degree in their market and offering the awareness in the different awareness channels so that they are able to find the program that they want. Always be looking at how you're providing value. Anytime cost is a factor, it's an extension to look into what value are you providing. So like Stephen had mentioned, reducing the time to completion and how can they get into that next step that they want to take faster and more cost effectively. Thinking local, continue to look at your local labor market trends, looking at which programs can continue to enhance what's going on there, and make sure that you aren't forgetting about that market. Sometimes we believe we might have that market already under lock because that's where we are located, and just making sure that we don't forget to start local and think local. And then just long-term strategy, continuing to align programs with high demand career outcomes so that we are in sync with getting students into jobs that provide them a better outlook for their career. And I know a lot of individuals on this call are constantly in evaluation mode to see if they've got the right programs, which ones should be invested in, which ones should be sunset, and just continue doing that as a best practice.